these authors to town. Very excited to have Kimberly King Parsons here. Her book of short stories, Blacklight, was longlisted for the National Book Award. Her new novel, We Were the Universe, is fantastic. I'm in the middle of it right now. I highly recommend it. Very tender, kaleidoscopic evocation of motherhood and friendship and grief. Very excited to have her with us tonight. So,
Hello, hi. I see some people from workshop earlier. Thank you for coming back. Thank you so much to Austin and Chris for all that you've done to make today so fun. I know that I have like basically an hour to 45 minutes to sort of read, but if someone read to me for 45 minutes, I would want to set myself on fire. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read two little sections, not little, but like little-ish sections from each book, and then we can talk about stuff and have a Q&A at the end instead of it just being me reading to you. So I guess I'll start by reading a little bit of the story Foxes, which is from Blacklight, which came out in 2019. And this was my first book, and it's a short story collection. And a lot of the characters that I'm interested in are kind of characters who are extreme in some way. And so in this story, I'll read just from the beginning, but this is a mother and a daughter who are, the father has just left the home. The mother and the daughter are sort of hanging out in the living room. The daughter has made a little, like a pillow fort in the living room, and the daughter is telling the mother stories. And the stories sort of start to take a weird, violent turn. And also the mother is a high functioning alcoholic. And so I say all of this because I'm really interested in characters who are sort of darker and who are working through their stuff. And when this story was published in the Paris Review, I had this person wrote me who said, I really love this story, and I just hope that you and your daughter get the help that you need. And I was so mortified by the idea that someone had not caught that this was fiction, first of all. But then I was sort of thinking about it a little more, and he's not totally wrong, because I really did pull a lot of the language that the child uses in this story directly from my kids' mouths. In fact, for many years, it took me almost 10 years to figure out how to write this story. I knew there was something wrong with it for like 8 years, but I didn't know what it was. And then after I had my kids and they grew up and were able to speak, I realized that I needed a child voice in here too. Before, I just had this mother like telling us what her daughter was saying, but I didn't actually have the child's voice in it at all. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized that kids say very creepy things. My son Lev thinks that there's a woman made of garbage who lives in our walls. He says her name is Trish, that she's really nice. My other son, when he was younger, was obsessed with the idea of a blood bank. He's like, wait, you mean there's a whole building full of blood? Yeah. They're just really creepy, dark-minded in many ways. And it's because they're trying to figure out the way that the world works. And so that was what was missing. That was like the secret ingredient for this story, was to figure out the child's voice and what kind of story she might tell her mother. So it took me a really long time to get there, but I'm just going to read for a few minutes from Foxes. What's worth happening happens in deep woods, or so my daughter tells me. Or plot lines. In the deep woods, someone is chasing, someone else is getting hacked. Hatchets are lifted, brought down, down, down. Men stutter blood onto snow. A cast of animals, some local, some outlandish, show up to feast on the bits. The bitty bits, she'll say, the tasty remainderings. Good luck diverting her. Good luck correcting or getting a word in once she gets going. It's gruesome, but this type of storytelling, I've been assured, is perfectly normal among children her age. I have a fat stack of books concerned with the inner lives of little girls. I have glossy pamphlets, full-color articles I've taken from waiting rooms. Her stories may be distasteful, but my daughter is happiest describing dark, spattered worlds. Routine is what's important, all the experts agree. Stability. So tonight is the same. Woods it is, I say, when she takes me by the wrist. I'm the first to admit it. I tune her out. I know there are foxes in her stories. I know there are men. She misses the dogs, maybe. She misses her father. She's an excitable kid, prone to rushed speech. Truthfully, she spits. I'm told this mess is evidence of a rich mind. Doctors say it, teachers. My girl has strands of dazzling beads hidden in that throat. She pulls them up from somewhere rich, way in the back. The tent she's fashioned is small and drab, a sagging thing posted by a pair of bar stools. Soiled, pulled straight from our beds, these drooping sheets are my daughter and myself layered, fitted and flat. She scurries inside, whistles for me. I bunch up and crawl through, hem in hand, hose flashing, pumps kicked off. The air inside is damp, trapped and sharp from her socked feet. My cheap and not cheap perfumes mix and float. I'm taking too long to settle. My daughter's big, wet eyes are over there in the dark where I can't see, rolling at me while I struggle. My friction drags dust and old fur up from the carpet. I've been meaning to vacuum, but the machine is in the upstairs closet, heavy with a full bag, a whole skein of orange yarn caught around one of the bristles. My daughter sighs. Patience is a muscle, I remind her. Hers is puny, a weak slick of lavender. My knees don't bend how they used to. My head is doming the roof. Her flashlight clicks on, catches a universe of grit and leftover dog. There's Bit-Bit and Rowdy and Poco turning in the air, specks of my daughter and me, of my fool ex-husband, our old family, filthy and granular. Ready? She says. Deep in the woods, the night is running. From whom? I ask my daughter. From Let Me Tell It, she says. She's not going to like it, but I've forgotten something crucial, an important part of our routine. Half a second, I say. I reverse scoot, wreck against the bar stool, threaten the entire design. My daughter hisses. Bass awkward is what the fool would call this maneuver, and he wouldn't be wrong. I'm quick at the wet bar. A dirty glass is pretty clean when you're the only one who uses it, when you enjoy the same drink every time. There's scarlet lipstick gobbed on the rim, all me. I get back in the tent before my daughter's feelings are hurt. Her light catches cut crystal in my hand, scatters blue and yellow sparks. Sherry, I say. It doesn't need to be said, but I like the word. A secretary's drink, a middle-class nightcap. She knows I'm finished forever with the red top bottles and the black top bottles, the plastic bottles with tops I lost, bottles that left clear sludge in every coffee mug in this house. My daughter beams my face like a cop. I take a sip, dainty, then lift the sheet, break the seal. I push my drink under, outside but not away. This is me being responsible. I tuck myself in at the wrist, a cold hand out to touch the beaded glass. Just sherry. By all means, I tell her, go on. My daughter's teeth are gray with white flecks. When she tells, foam gathers in her corners, drips in ribbons under her chin. She spews. My only job is not to flinch. Flashlit, she looks nothing like me. Deep in the woods, the night is running. He will do whatever it takes to get back home. Her teeth are my fault. Weak dentin on my side of the tree. Our photo albums are full of snarled smiles, gum disease going back through the ages, white sores and also clicky jaws, people predisposed to clench and do damage even as they slept. Plus, my daughter's precious grape soda is corrosive, I'm told. I push water and milk, but she bites me. She may not be pretty, but my girl's brain is just fine. It is. She dodged the worst genes somehow. Her father, the fool, was a man who broke the binding of the biggest ever book of party jokes, kept the glue-crusted pages paper-clipped or rubber-banded, dog-eared in his glove compartment, crammed into his blue jeans. The fool said, "What's black and white and..." Wait, then fumbling, dull flipping. I'm not much better. At my daughter's age, I folded my failures into textbooks, blamed broken chalk for my public mistakes. Even now, I count the months on my knuckles and navigate the world by making an L out of one hand. I've got country smarts, the fool used to say, his arm deep in some majestic carcass he'd tracked for days and shot for fun. It's not the fault of the deplorable towns where the fool and I grew up. Him in the bleak piney woods near the penitentiary, me up where Texas bludgeons Oklahoma in a county known for making glue. Both of us were jaundiced preemies. Both of us were nursed on evaporated milk instead of formula, sucked on toys coated with lead paint. Whether it's nature or nurture, for people like the fool and me, there is a long beat between learning something and knowing it. For us, answers come later when we're far away from the question, if they come at all. He makes money, lots of it, which obscures his deficiencies. I overcompensate, read what I can, take expert advice. At least I know what I don't know, which is more than I can say for the fool. Deep in the woods, the night is running. He will do whatever it takes to get back to his family. The woods are full of enemies, hooded men setting traps, wearing black cloaks, men with needle-nosed pliers. But the night is unstoppable. He has been on the move for so long. He has leaped out of snares, set fire to cloaked men. He has turned pliers around on the bad guys, ripped their eyelids off in self-defense. I'm not sure how my daughter managed it, but in this altogether different, deplorable town, awful for nicer reasons, spring breakers and prefab houses, eggy smelling tap water, she is the best and brightest in her young class. I've got a bumper sticker that says, "Ask me about my honors student." She comes home with her backpack full of flashcards, arms cuffed and rolled up poster board. She taught the dogs, when we still had the dogs, to sit in Spanish. "Eureka," she shrieks 3-4 times a night. This house is nothing like the mobile homes the fool and I grew up in, full of boilerplate poverty and the lazy rage that comes with it. Me fighting my sisters for stolen ketchup packets, the fool dunking his dingy little brothers in weak old bathwater. My girl has a writing desk and an electric pencil sharpener. She lists endangered species over alphabet soup, says she will be an architect and a veterinarian and an astronaut and a mommy. Shampoo horned, she sings a song of South American capitals, sketches the water cycle on a steamy shower door. When I'm toweling her off, I trace cursive letters on her back, sweet little notes just for her. No matter how fast I spell them out, she never misses a word. Through those teeth, my daughter tells me about baobab trees. "Have you heard of our ecosystem?" she says when I tuck her in. "Have you heard of my inner beauty and my outer beauty?" And I'll stop there. So that's just the beginning. Yeah, you can do a thing or not do a thing, it's up to you. It's interesting because the other part I'm gonna read is also a mother giving a bath, which I'm like, I guess it was there all along. Yeah, I think that one of the challenges from moving from writing shorter fiction to the novel was this idea of how do you maintain these relationships over like 90,000 words instead of 3,000 words, right? But I'm still very much interested in the same type of characters. And I know that I had this sort of aha moment with that short story where I knew the mom was really distracted, but I didn't know what she was distracted by. And when I figured out what was in her hand, like that it was just a drink in her hand. And as the story goes on, you can't tell from the part I read as much, but she gets more and more drunk and starts making less and less sense. And we start to realize how her facade of being like a good mother who's reading all the stuff she needs to read and is taking care of things is like really cracking. She's really barely hanging on. And We Were the Universe, which came out in May. For the longest time, people would ask me, what is this book about? I would just say it was about Texas motherhood and psychedelics. And those are just 3 things that I happen to have a lot of experience with. So that's why I wrote about them. But I was born and raised in Texas. And then when I had my kids, for the longest time, I was really worried that like having children was going to really derail my writing career because I had these two kids to take care of it sort of in rapid succession. But I realized really quickly that not only were they not an obstacle, but they're actually the path, because so much of the writing that I do that means the most to me is about that relationship between mothers and children and between parents and kids. And so I'm reading this book called The Obstacle is the Way, which highly recommend, which is just this idea that whatever it is that you think is causing you a problem is actually probably the path forward. So like if you're a director making a movie, you're supposed to shoot a scene in a diner at night, but you can't get that diner at night. So you shoot it in the morning. And then the light streaming in makes that scene the most iconic and beautiful scene in the movie. That's because the obstacle was actually the way forward. So I was trying to think of things in those terms. But when I sat down to like really figure out what I wanted to write about, I knew that I did want to write about a character who was still figuring out how it is that you can be a mother without sublimating your full personality. And how do you protect that part of yourself that is still you? And so I'm just gonna read, this is a PG-13 excerpt from a book that I would say is NC-17. And so we'll get a nice version for the library. This part deals with psychedelics. So a lot of the book deals with desire and fantasy and grief, but in this section we're dealing with like Kit is our narrator with her relationship to psychedelics. So all you need to know to set this up is that her daughter has just thrown a tantrum and her daughter Gilda, and tomorrow Kit is leaving town for the first time with her friend to go to Montana on like a little trip. And I guess before I start that, I want to set this up too. The first line here is something my editor and I went back and forth with, because I'll read the line to you. It says, "The fact that I'm still breastfeeding an almost 4-year-old is either my greatest accomplishment or secret shame." And my editor said, "Do we need to say almost 4-year-old? Why don't we say 3-year-old?" And I was like, no, because I'm interested in shame. I'm interested in exploring the extreme. So if it was just like the fact that I'm still breastfeeding a toddler, like that's not it. The fact is that it's getting too close and that even she knows that maybe it's going on for too long. She'll explain why she's breastfeeding a child that's probably too old to be breastfed, but he was a little concerned. Do we want people to like this narrator? And for me, I find that the most despicable narrators, and she's not really despicable, I actually think she's fine, but I like despicable narrators because I like having those moments where we try to understand someone who's very different than us and who would make very different decisions than we would. And so I feel that those problems can't be revealed in moderation. They have to be revealed in extremes. And so this is Kit. Here she goes. "The fact that I'm still breastfeeding an almost 4-year-old is either my greatest accomplishment or my secret shame, depending on the company. Some of my crunchy message board moms seem to think this is just fine, ideal even. Gilda calls breast milk good, says, I need good because my heart gets thirsty. I only nurse her before bed or first thing in the morning, or like now, when she gets hurt or scared and needs quick comfort. The body takes care of Gilda when the mind is elsewhere. There used to be a sort of rush, a blissed out hormonal thing that happened. The happy feeling is supposedly caused by the same chemicals that rinse your brain when you get to the chorus of your favorite song. Meted out dopamine sweeping through, carrying you to the next verse. Nursing is a shortcut, I know, but I don't understand the problem with shortcuts, so long as something nice is on the other side. My high school guidance counselor called me pleasure seeking, and I still don't understand what's so bad about that. Beats the alternative. But I haven't felt the happy feeling in a long time. Lately, my skin crawls when Gilda latches. Finally, my friend Yesenia said, when I called to confess this, time to cut that shit out. Yes is the picture of maternal grace and competence, a childcare oracle I consult almost daily. My sister and I weren't exactly parented, so it's yes I turn to for advice, though we have different approaches. I got deep into attachment parenting early on, charmed by message boards with names like Merciful Mamas and Empathy Wins. They snared me in their bright, loving net, their warm dogma about as far from my mother's beliefs as any I could find. Bed sharing, capital B, is one of the foundational tenets lauded by this bunch, along with being responsive and, of course, breastfeeding. Bullshit, Yes said. If they're old enough to ask for it, they're too old to get it. This is the thing people say about nursing when they're trying to be cute, everyone thinking they're the only one to say it. Just use your mom voice and say no, Yes instructed. What's mom voice? I had to ask, a genuine question. I keep nursing because it's the path of least resistance, not because I like it. Gilda unlatches and smiles at me, tantrum over. Bath time, I say. This is a tactic for my otherwise useless father, a singular flash of parenting brilliance I recall from early childhood. If they're acting crabby, throw them in the water. Gilda's chipper, cheerful. That's the disarming thing about tantrums, how fleeting or everlasting they can be. Grandma sent you a present, I sing, holding a ripped open FedEx box, enticing her to the tub. I have to be naked to get it, right? She asked, stripping out of her shirt as she runs to the bathroom. Yep, I say, thinking, please, never repeat that out of context. Please don't make some sad lifelong association. I follow Gilda down the hall, twist on the taps in the tub, and let the water thunder. My mother has sent little capsule animals in the mail. Gilda soaks in warm, melon-scented bubbles and watches the gel caps split apart, squeals as the creatures break free. I am vigilant from my perch on the closed toilet lid. Well, vigilant-ish. Instead of paying the overdue electric bill or using the meditation app my husband made me download, I read DMT message boards on the phone while Gilda is occupied. This is the psychedelic the young people are doing these days. Or maybe they've been doing it forever, only I've just heard about it. It's a naturally occurring compound, a so-called spirit molecule that's already present in the body. When taken at high doses, it triggers a 10-minute trip that feels like 12 hours. This sounds like my kind of party. Self-transforming fractal elves come around to speak in cogs and wheels, plus soothing plasticine sounds like your head is inside bubble wrap, but nice. Impossible colors, talking to the dead, etc. I've come to think of DMT like it's a tropical vacation or skydiving, something for the bucket list. All the insight, none of the headache. Lose your shit, melt into a silver pool of self, and then bam, sober, back home with your kid and a soft, fleeting dream. The ideal psychedelic for a busy mom. How much do you love me? Gilda asks from the tub. All the way to the top, I say, imagining the look on her face tomorrow when she realizes I'm out of town. I'd rather do DMT than go to Montana. For me, psychedelics have always been beneficial, therapeutic, and I'm referring to fully obliterative macro doses, not these barely feel it micro tinctures people blab about on public radio. Before Gilda, I used to text the word spaceship to a kid named Lloyd. He'd meet me at the donut place, and I'd leave with a glassine envelope, soft paper squares tucked inside. Dropping acid was this magnificent clearing, a long white hand swiping layers of chalk from the blackboard of my brain. I could do it and come back clean, focused. Psychedelics squash shame and guilt, help you make sense of things that make no sense. A trip is a story with a clear beginning, middle, and end, a narrative that unfolds perfectly, a plot tailored for you, telling you exactly what you need to hear. I worry I'll never have an internal supernova again because I'll never be in the right mindset until Gilda is what, grown? Away at some future hypothetical sleepaway camp? Even then, the stakes are too high. She's ruined me with her unconditional love. Nobody wants an LSD mom. Nobody wants to be the LSD mom. Could I take LSD to get over my fear of taking LSD? During the trip, could I make peace with my multitudes, come down confident that a mother does not have to fit a specific set of criteria to be good? Then, could I take LSD again later, for real? It'll never happen. My husband would never approve. He truly believes the present moment is a gift, that the desire for chemical escapism is a sign of maladjustment. Isn't that just taking the easy way out? He once asked me, leaving your body like that? Oh man, I didn't say, is it ever? For him, drugs are remnants of youth, like video games or skateboarding. He checks out library books about meditation for me. He bought me a certificate for a float tank, a sweet, useless gesture we couldn't afford. Hanging out in that dark vat didn't work, like bobbing in a warm, wet coffin. I felt nothing, not even fear, and I'm very claustrophobic. I don't love elevators, and once when I was a kid, my sister had to cut me out of a too small turtleneck. They don't tell you that the tank people dissolve tons of salt in the water to make you float, that any tiny cut or scrape gets irritated. You think you know your body, whether it has cuts or scrapes, but you don't really know until you're in that faux cosmic suit. Hangnails on every finger, chapped lips, weird genital stinging, all the parts we do daily, tiny damage to, never noticing. The tiled walls force Gilda's happy voice into echo. In the many, many DMT testimonials I've read on message boards, users reach a point in the telling that defies description, a kind of narrative black hole. There are no words, but some try anyway. Protected enclosure, they say, rapturous containment, something gleaming otherworldly on the ceiling above. In the tub, Gilda does that thing I hate where she shifts from front to back, rocking and sloshing, making a household tidal wave. It's time to fish her out. I drain the tub and towel her off. I'm buttoning her into her pajamas when I realize she somehow managed to keep her head totally dry. Her face is dirty, her hair sticky and sweaty. Oh well. The sun is still up, but I'm angling to shut down the show. A sudden ecstatic sense of possibility comes over me. The sooner it's tomorrow, the sooner I'll be with Pete, out of town, free. I pull the blackout shades, close the curtains. One thing you can do as a parent is manipulate time. Kids trust you to tell them when a day is over, and sometimes that has nothing to do with the sun. Never mind if the birds are still singing, if there are teenagers throwing frisbees in the cul-de-sac. I worry that my influence in Gilda's sphere as her mother is massive. Our spheres are almost entirely our mother's doing, for better or worse. Dinner time, I say, but it isn't. Thank you. All right. So happy to answer any questions or talk about anything you want to talk about, whatever that looks like. Thanks again for coming out in an eventful week. Happy to see you here. I know we're all probably tired.
I read the book when it first came out through the library app. And as I was reflecting on here, I realized that the book has this, it could be because what happened recently, but it has this underlevel tension building. It's like, will it happen? Will it happen? Will it happen? Was this intentional or did this happen because of the subject matter?
I think that there is, I think in terms of tension instead of plot, like I'm always very suspicious of plot in general. Like the way that I write is really focused on the, like sort of line to line and really leaning into voice. And so for me, I'm never thinking like, well, what happens on this page? I'm always thinking, where's the tension coming from on this page? So I think it's definitely something I think about a lot. And in this case, there's tension. I was talking about this earlier, like the tension that I felt like personally, like growing up in a household with people who had radically different viewpoints than I had is something that I am trying to capture here with Kit. Like Kit and her mother are at odds in all these different ways. And yet you have one mother, that's it. And so she's trying to figure out how to both be the best mother she can be and also how it's always like as you're parenting, you're reaching backwards to your own childhood and you're also trying to do the best, trying to change all the things that screwed you up. And then you, of course, are just screwing up your kids in your own new, unique ways. But she's just trying to always figure out where she fits in all these places. So there's a lot of tension coming from a lot of different places. It's also coming from the other moms at the playground and this idea of what does it mean to be a mother in general. And all the things that she thought she knew and understood about the way she was parented. Then when she's actually in that situation, she's also giving her mother, I think, a lot more grace perhaps than she was as a child because she herself feels that she wasn't parented at all. Yeah, but I'm definitely always thinking about ways to keep tension there. And also, and there's a bigger question here of like, is she actually going to go off the edge? Like, is she actually going to do the bad thing and do the easy thing? Or is she going to keep it together? And I won't do that for you, but for me, it was like very much a story about the tug of nostalgia and not a story about even about current desire. It's much more about past desire. So the desire for, it's not that she wants to do those things necessarily, it's that she wants to be 20 years old doing those things again, which is of course the hardest thing to accept is just that time has passed. And so she can't, if she were to do this, if she were to go and buy DMT and do this today, it wouldn't be great for her. It would be terrible. But like, that's the thing, is just to try to get back to that place where she felt she had figured things out when right now she doesn't really know anything. Question, thank you. It doesn't have to be about the books. It could be about like publishing or writing or anything. Yeah.
So I know some like baby books and I haven't read any of them, but is there anything like that inspired you or sort of pushed you to go to writing?
Yeah, well, so at dinner I was explaining, I grew up in a house without a lot of books and I never once saw an adult read for pleasure in my life. So I had this idea from somewhere, I don't know where, that this was the path that I wanted to do. And then I was completely not encouraged to pursue it. My parents were like, they didn't really even know about the world that it was possible, but they were also just very much like, save yourself a lot of heartache of trying to have this life and go into real estate or hospitality or whatever. And so I just had this really stubborn, I'm very stubborn and very patient, which I think are two things that played out well because it took me so long to write my first book. And as soon as I did, like, my whole life changed, but I think that when I was a kid, I just had this image in my head of wanting to do this, and also reading books was so critical to me, even though I didn't grow up in a house with a lot of books. By the time I got a library card and was in libraries, I was like, oh my God, I can travel, I can like be all these different people, I can get inside people's heads. And so I knew how critical books were to me. I ultimately had a bunch of siblings later, but I grew up an only child. And then after divorce, I ended up with 6 siblings. But so for many years, I was like very lonely. And this was a way to access all these people and to do all these different things and have all these opportunities I couldn't have. And the idea that I could do that for someone else was really wild. One of my earliest memories is like hiding in a clothes hamper with a flashlight, reading like very smutty romance novels that I was not supposed to, that you could just like get from the like you can get anything from the library and just take it home. And it really like kind of blew my mind that I had access to all of this stuff. So I wanted to think about how I could maybe do that for somebody else. Yeah. Thank you.
So I feel like I would know because I'm not an author, but I feel like writing is one of those sort of like a make or break career where it's very like, it's very extreme in that like, it's not a safe career.
Yeah.
And me and her both want to go into careers similar to that, considering like economics, architecture, law, politics, stuff like that. So I'm just wondering how you got your start in a career like this and like how you got like discovered, I guess.
I like that people, the idea of being discovered. Yeah, I think you have to really bludgeon your way in. Nobody's discovering you. You have to like really make it. But it's like, I mean, the only way that I did it was just by doing the work that only you can do, that like is exactly your voice, your perspective, your particular thing. And for many years, I was writing this book about an elephant trainer at turn of the century Coney Island because I thought that would sell. I have no personal connection to Coney Island. I don't like history. I was a terrible student. I don't even really like elephants that much, but I just wanted to write this book because I had gotten into my head that it would sell. And of course, we know that there's no predicting what is going to be the next big book. By the time you finish your vampire book, they're on to Dragon Riders or whatever. So it's impossible to try to predict it. And all the while I was writing this bad, uninspired book about an elephant trainer, I was writing these weird, dark little stories about, you know, queer girls in Texas. And I was like, this is my secret stuff. Like no one's really gonna be interested in this. But that was ultimately the thing that, of course, people were interested in, because when you are your most authentic self, people are drawn to you like a magnet. But it takes a really long time to figure out what that self is, I think. And so, yeah, I thought, why would anyone want to read about like bisexual girls in Texas doing psychedelics? And it turns out that people are here for it. So I just wouldn't have ever known that because I was busy thinking they might like elephants and elephant trainers. So I think the thing I'm always telling my students is to like take a big swing. And if you're talking about architecture, my partner has a degree in architecture and was in architecture for a long time. Like figuring out like what it is that you want to do and making it really stylish, like hyper stylish. Sometimes my students are like, I'm afraid to be too much. And I was like, be a lot, be like as much as you can so that you save everybody a lot of time so that they know what you're about. And I think of that with my writing too, where it's not like I want to like lure someone into the world of the book. I want them to really quickly know what I'm doing. And then if they don't like it, they should put it down, because we choose our audience with every aesthetic choice that we make. And so for you, for architecture, for design, for politics, whatever, be whatever it is, like clearly in a way that's really legible to other people right away. And then just like figure out the thing that you're really good at and then just do it over and over and over again. That's what I would say. Yeah. Good luck.
I'm sorry, I missed your presentation primarily, but I am sitting here because I have a 13-year-old granddaughter who reads a lot.
Mhm.
Won't tell me what she reads, and a mother who's very bright.
Yeah.
Would your book be appropriate for one or both?
The mother, not the daughter, not that
Okay,
she's
that's
baby.
what I'm
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah.
I don't wanna,
No, yeah, for sure. Definitely for the mother. I think there are stories that have young characters in my short story collection, but they are characters for adults about
Okay.
children, right? But yeah, for sure, anybody who's experienced motherhood, I think can find something in here that could be potentially, I think it's not the common version of motherhood that we're told. It's also characters who are at times like making bad decisions and who are ambivalent about things, but I think it can be nice to see that. if only to then reassure yourself that you're doing the right thing. We were talking about earlier, the Flaubert quote about like being dangerous and crazy in your work so that you can be orderly and organized in your life, and this is what I am exactly, because my normal life is so boring, and yet I write these characters who are like doing all this wild stuff because, and that's also writing into nostalgia, because they're doing the things that I did when I was 20 that I will never do again. But I like to entertain that, because sometimes I think your reader can feel the heat from a fantasy or a memory, just the desire to do it again, and so, yeah.
So we talked a lot earlier in the workshop about,
Can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry, we talked a lot in the workshop earlier about word choice and language and then so you start reading Foxes and I'm really struck by the line, men stutter blood onto snow.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about how you arrive at a line like that and how much you had to revise and work? Because you said you worked on that story for a really long time. So can you talk about the evolution of that and lines like that?
Sure. So the way that I work, it does take me a really long time, but the lines pretty much come out how I want them to. They don't really change because of the way that I'm building it from, in this case, that's a moment of acoustic consecution, because I'm pulling sounds. So I'm pulling from plot lines, the T sound and plot lines. And then hatchets are lifted, brought down, like the hatchets, plot lines, those T sounds are informing stutter. And then blood is coming from down, like I'm just pulling sounds around. And so it's the kind of thing that when you're writing it, it feels like this really fun game that you're playing and like a puzzle that you're moving around. But then as soon as you make a sentence, your reader just reads it as a sentence and it's just like, okay, that's a sentence. But I know that everything is informed by both like objects that I'm pulling through from line to line, but also acoustics. And so I'm listening just to try to hear what's there. And then that refrain, what's worth happening happens in deep woods, is I know gonna become like this is now the sort of leitmotif, if you're talking about music, for the rest of the story. So it can keep coming up in these different ways, but it has to change. And something has to deepen in a way. But the way that I revise is by looking for like cracks where I talk about portals and mirrors in revision, like, is there a door that is kind of like open, but I haven't walked through it yet? So maybe it's just a mention of something that I realize, well, I should probably, in this case, like I should probably talk about this divorce more. Like there's this mention of this fool ex-husband. Well, that's a big portal. Like that's a big thing that I could explore. And so you mentioned the fool ex-husband on page 1. Now you've got a whole world of information that you can go back to in different ways. And so I'm always looking for, my revision process is really like figuring out how to expand stuff. And so these little sections, because of the fact that they're written with sound in mind, like the way you would write a poem kind of, they kind of fall apart if you start messing with the lines or pulling things out, or like there's a reason that they're in this order and in this way. And it's not to say that the whole story comes out exactly like I want it, definitely doesn't, but like sections do. So there's like these 2 paragraphs are like clicked. And so once they're clicked into place, those just get moved somewhere in the text, but those stay together because they're one unit now. They can't come apart. And so the way I know that something is starting to work is when I have like several units that now I'm like, okay, this is all starting to make sense. And then I can fill in those gaps. And when you're talking about the novel, so for me, the big difference between short stories and novels is like a short story to me is kind of like you're looking at a keyhole, through a keyhole, at a room that's sort of perfectly composed. And the room doesn't even need you to go inside it. It's just perfect for you to see. That's a short story, right? Everything is just so. But a novel is like somebody throws open the front door and it's like, come in, like look under the rug, look in these drawers, go in that closet. Like there's so much freedom to like explore and to go into all these different places. And so there's a real sense of like digression and all of these moments that can sort of spin out. And maybe you have like 3 pages where you're going to talk about DMT. And then later, if you're like, this didn't really work, you could pull it out and it would probably be okay. If you could pull it out, it probably wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. But the way that the novel works is sort of just like a series of mirrors and portals, like a series of these things. And the way for me a short story works is like, it's just trying to figure out how it like clicks together and stays together in that way. And that means for me, I think in some ways writing a short story is harder because also a collection, you're talking about 12 stories, so that's 12 beginnings, 12 middles, and 12 ends. And for a novel, you just have to do it once, even though, of course, it's like I think a novel is kind of like a marriage, like you have to love it even when it doesn't feel like it loves you back. And a short story is like a hot little fling that you're like, oh, I can sort of see the arc of it in a shorter amount of time. So it feels a little bit more, it feels sexier, but I don't know, I think it's actually in many ways harder to write a short story that really stands up on its own. Yeah.
I just read Blacklight and you're talking about the stories and just to build off of what you just said, I noticed that the order of the stories, I mean, there would be a really short story and then a long story, short story, several times throughout the book. And was that your selection?
Yeah.
Your choice, or was it like?
It's mine, yeah, there are these little flash pieces, and it's weird because, the flash story is like generally like a page or 2 pages, it could be as short as a paragraph. And there are a few here. I think of a short story collection kind of like a mixtape. And so I'm trying to figure out how to set a mood. And then in the case of those little flash pieces, it's weird because I don't really write flash anymore, but this was certainly something that I spent a lot of time on when I was a beginning writer. I think just sort of developing stamina to keep going in many ways. But I like to have moments where, so the first story is like 30 pages. And then now we need a little break and we need something different. We need like a very quick, different voice. And then we're gonna go back to the regularly scheduled programming sort of. And so I kind of tried to modulate that the way that would feel, knowing, did you read it in order?
Yeah.
Bless you, because a lot of people don't. So then it doesn't even matter what I do. Like I think about that a lot. Like you give someone a mixtape and then they just hit it random and listen to it in whatever order. For me, I spent a lot of time thinking about the way that I wanted things to land. And also I wanted to put characters that I felt were more affable earlier in the collection and like maybe save the creepy alcoholic mother for like later in the book. But it turns out that I think maybe in the same way I was saying, like show people who you are right away. I think in some ways it's actually better to just right out of the gate be like, this is a book about very dark things. Like, and if you're not here for it, fine, like let's part ways and we'll move on. But yeah, I thought about using those shorter stories as a sort of like palate cleanser, like a little break, something that you could sort of like really quickly get a whole scene or a whole world from and then move forward.
But it worked.
Oh, good. Thank you.
What would you tell the author who like logged in the computer, whatever document you used to write on?
Yeah.
That first blinking like cursor, what would you tell the author that wrote this book? What would you tell them?
To do.
But yeah, like what would you tell them? Like what would your guidance be? Like, reflecting back to, again, of course it's you, but
The
like,
beginning, yeah.
yeah, sitting down and like, all right, I just logged in with Scrivener or Word, or
Yeah.
whatever you use.
Yeah.
What would you tell?
I think I think one rule that I use is the sense that when I start to feel deep shame about something that I'm writing, that's how I know I'm in business. Like the feeling that I am not quite sure if I should say it is an absolute indicator to say it. And so also when I start to feel that something is not is the easy thing to say, or I start to feel like I'm saying the hard thing, like that's the right thing to say. The hard thing, the thing that's weirder, like all of the things that I feel are, that I was afraid to say for so long, like that's exactly the stuff you should say. And also I think that your book will tell you what it wants to be. And so all you have to do is show up for it. If you just show up for it every day, and not even every day, honestly, I have like a family and other jobs. Like I'm not like super, you hear about some writers who are like, I write for 4 hours every day. Like that's not me. I've never been like that. But I do have dedicated time where Anthony Doerr talks about not letting the paint dry on a project, because when the paint dries, it's just harder to get back in. And so I try to look at it every day, even if I'm looking at it and I don't even know what it is. I just want to have it. I like to be haunted by it enough so that when I'm living my life in my normal day, if like a bit of conversation falls into it, or if I see something and I can put it in the book, I just want to keep, as one of my mentors said, like you want to stay open for business. So I try to stay open for business, but I think I would just say to like show up and know that all of the problems that you have, they're not really problems. They are just the path forward, and like just to keep giving it the attention that it needs. It will tell you what it wants to be. All of those things will be solved. I had a really lucky thing with this one, which is that I figured out the ending of this novel about halfway through, which sometimes happens with a short story where like I know the last line. Sometimes I'll know like the first line and the last line, and then it's like, what are the 14 pages in the middle? but I knew really quickly the way that this novel ends, and it ends in a strange way, and I just knew I had to get there, and my editor was like, this is definitely the right ending, but we're not there yet, like, there's a bridge missing, it was like the middle was the tricky part. But I was so grateful to at least have an ending, because the idea of not having an ending, to me, I think would have been a lot scarier, to just not know what I was doing at all, or to know, am I ever gonna finish it? Can I even write a novel at all? It was very, nerve wracking, but I think I would just be like, calm down. That's what I would tell myself, calm down. Thank you.
Going back to the discussion of short stories, I think you should kind of like a flash story.
Yeah.
Like a short story that's only a couple pages long.
Yeah.
As we're finding, like me and her, as we're finding colleges,
Yeah.
and we're writing personal essays, which are sort of their own short stories in their own regards.
Sure.
Like, I'm kind of going across a lot of struggles. I'm seeing a lot of like open ends or loose ends with mine, or they just feel rushed.
Sure.
Like, how would I go about that?
That's a great question. So it's figuring out what is the least that you can say to give the most picture, to get to do the most work. And so it's like, when you think of having a line that's going to only cause your reader more questions, like maybe you don't want as many of those when you're writing something very short. You want things to be really like declarative and clear about your direction, so that it's not, and then maybe you can still end with open-ended questions, because I do think they actually like things to end on a sort of note of like questioning rather than answering. But I think it's like figuring out what stuff to leave out. And so maybe that means that you write something longer. Some people do this. I write the opposite, where I write really short and then try to find places to explode it. But other people I know talk about writing like a vomit draft, where they're like, I just say everything and then I go back and make a shape out of it. And so maybe it's that you actually write something that's 10 pages long to get yourself down to 2 pages. But you figure out in those 10 pages, well, what's really important? Like, where are the hot spots in the story? And then, yeah, so that when your reader finishes, they feel a sense of like a complete whole, or that they can fill in those blanks themselves, without having to be like, I don't understand, I don't know. It's tricky though, yeah.
What about using the one syllable exercise that we did?
You absolutely could do this. Great, thank you. We did a workshop, and one of the exercises that I do sometimes when I feel stuck is a teacher in my MFA told me to take 10 minutes and write using only single syllable words. So it feels really hard at first. You're like, how could I possibly do this? But as soon as you get going, you realize that you have to, it doesn't let you use language the way that you normally would. You have to step around the obvious choice. And so what it does is it starts to light up different parts of your brain, and you start to make different connections in a really cool way. The example that I gave in class is that there was a student in there whose work I never really loved, but on this day, we were sharing what we had written, and he said, he was trying to say history professor, but he said, the man who taught us of the past, right? Because it had to be single syllables. And I was like, that's the best thing that guy's ever written in his whole life. But it really was, it was so good. And it was something, because he would have never gotten there on his own. He would have reached for the thing that was closest. But so sometimes you can take a section or a paragraph that feels like it's sticky, it's not working, and you can just strip it down to single syllables and see if you can figure something out. And also when you're just starting looking at a blank cursor, sometimes a single syllable does the trick too, because you just have to strip things down. And even today in our workshop, we were talking about, I wanted to say the word window, so did another student. We both said glass, because it's like, I'm looking through the glass at fall. Like I would have just said through the window. But it brings this strangeness to the story or to whatever you're writing, because it doesn't sound like you, because it's not what you would have picked, Also, it brings up words that you may not necessarily use. Another example was somebody, or in my thing, I use the word brusque, and it's not a word that I like or even would use, but I had to use it because I needed a one syllable word that meant brusque. So it did. But yeah, you could try that.
So going on that, did the novel come out in order? Or did you jump around a little bit, like you get stuck somewhere?
Yeah.
And instead of trying one of these exercises, you like flip to a different part of the book and see if that like gets going?
Yes, so I didn't write it in order. I had the past figured out long before I had the present plane. So I knew, and the past of the story is Kit, her sister Julie, her friend Yes, who she calls to ask about parenting advice. They are in a band together called You Are the Universe, and that's when they're young. And then Julie is the only one who's really talented. The rest are sort of working in service of her, but the band never makes it. They think it's going to make it and become this huge thing. It never makes it. And so I had that story fully figured out, but I didn't know from where Kit was narrating and why now, why is she now looking back? And so all of that present plane stuff started to click into place later. And so I still wrote it in these like clicked sections, but it would be, well, this is 3 pages about the band when they're 14. And so I'm gonna save it. I'm just gonna put it over here to the side, and I know that at some point it's gonna come back. And because this book is also about grief, because Kit has lost her sister Julie, grief really changes the nature of how we experience time, because you're in the present moment, but then you hear a song that reminds you of this person, and suddenly you're, catapulted back into time, or you see a restaurant where you ate once, or you see a color that they like, or whatever. The world becomes very dangerous in that way when you're a grieving person. And so I wanted to figure out how to sort of show that manipulation of time with the past and the present. At one point, this book was entirely written in the present tense, even the past tense, because I liked this idea of, I still stand by the idea, but the execution is another story. I liked the idea of a character being like, I'm at the playground with my daughter. Julie is 7, she's brushing her teeth. Like, I liked the idea of these things existing side by side in the present tense, because that's how it feels to me. When I'm remembering this person, it feels like they're there in that moment. But my lovely editor was like, hey, so it's a little bit confusing in places, and what if we put the past in past tense? And I was like, great idea, fine. And so we tried it, and I was worried that it would sort of kill that whole thing, but it didn't. It's fine. I think you could do a present tense of the past in a short story. I think it would work, but I think over 90,000 words, it just started to get a little confusing. And as there are more characters and stuff, like, it's just, I think it was the right decision, but.
Was there ever a time when you doubted yourself as an author? How did you find like confidence or reassurance to get through?
I love this question. Yes, all the time. I think there's like figuring out that part of you that is stubborn and that is like, I refuse to have the life that I currently have. I want this future life that's ahead. I can see it. To try to like visualize what it is that you want, I think is really important. And I think that it's a self-worth thing. So it's like, am I worth this? Am I worth the time it's taking to do this? Is this going to happen for me? I talk about how a lot of times people who are struggling with projects for like many, many years, like I coach clients on their manuscripts, like, so they've maybe been working on a book for 10 years and we'll read it and we'll talk about it. And a lot of times there's a reason that they don't want to be finished with it. Like, if they were finished, it would then be subject to criticism, which would be too painful for them for whatever reason. But I guess like just being really stubborn about what you want and what you are refusing to take. And then also looking around at people in your life as expanders instead of as competition, being like, well, if that guy got it, then I should have it. Or if that girl got it, I should have it. Whenever people get great things, like, social media is such a minefield of comparison, but I always just feel so happy. If someone won $100,000 prize, that means that I could win $100,000 prize. Like, someone has to win it. They just won it this time. Like, just that feeling that it's possible, and surrounding yourself with people who are living a life that's close to the life you want to live, or who are doing the things that's close to what you want to do. So that for me meant like hanging out with writers, hanging out with people who are really trying to do this stuff. And you never forget what you're trying to do when you're all trying to do the same thing, and you can celebrate your wins together and commiserate your losses, and you can bitch about stuff, and it's great. Yeah. So that's what I would say. Good luck.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
That's
much.
wonderful.